to actually believe, I do believe he, now this is where I'm going to start crying, so I have to, this is why I don't read in church. When people ask me, why don't you ever do the readings? It's because I don't get through them without crying. So I do believe in the crucifixion and resurrection and his coming back at some point. But his current presence in our lives today. Sorry.
Welcome to Music Ministry Podcast.
Welcome to Music Ministry Podcast.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us today on Music Ministry Podcast. Today we have a special guest with us, Fred.
Fred Chilese.
Chilese?
Yep.
Yep.
Chilese, yep.
Hey, well, thank you for joining.
It is my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Man, I'm so glad that you're here.
Well, thank you.
And, I wanted to tell you, you look like my relatives.
Is that a good thing, or because some of my relatives?
No, it's a good thing.
Oh, okay, okay.
Thing. Yes, but you have the same, I don't want to say demeanor, but I guess the facial. You look just like, you got everything about you. So I think that's pretty cool.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, I'm better than looking like one of your enemies or something like that. Definitely.
Right. So what church do you go to?
My wife is an Episcopal priest, and we're doing a Saturday evening service actually at our house in the Episcopal tradition. But I'm the praise team leader at First Presbyterian Church in Wickenburg. And I've been doing that almost exactly a year now.
Wow.
So
you got two ministries going on.
yes, my wife, again, as Episcopal priest, I've been playing in the Episcopal Church for decades now. And then she was also the vicar at St. Albans in Wickenburg up until June, the end of June. And then First Presbyterian offered me a position to come over, so I've been doing that on Sundays, again, for a year now, and then also with the Reconnect service that we have on Wednesday evenings, which has been a blast.
Awesome.
So.
How long have you been in Wickenburg?
Actually, I don't live in Wickenburg at all.
Oh.
We live in Peoria.
Oh.
But we drive up. We have loved Wickenburg for years. My wife and I both have motorcycles, and we would ride up here periodically just for breakfast or up to Yarnell, just because it's a really nice place to ride.
Yeah, beautiful.
So then when she was offered the position in Wickenburg, that we were hoping that would work out really well. So because again, we like Wickenburg quite a bit.
What part of, how long have you been in Peoria for?
Well, my family moved to Arizona when I was 2, and I've moved away a couple times. I did my master's in Montana and went to my bachelor's in Flagstaff, but I have lived in the Phoenix area for the vast majority of my life. So like 50 some of my 65 years. So
from 2 to 65.
Yeah.
Now, have you always been a believer?
Oh no, not even close. In fact, I still struggle, but I really started to believe at about 37, 38. My son was 5 or 6 years old. I can tell you exactly. He was 4 or 5 years old. We were going to an Episcopal church in Glendale, and with this really dynamic priest who's still a great friend of ours. And through that, and then through hearing some Christian music, I started to believe, because I used to view going to church as an anthropological study, that I would just watch people worshiping their gods, and I would just basically take pity on them, being the snob that I was, and probably still am. But then when I started to believe, I started to get it. I started to understand. I still resist. And I was thinking about this earlier today when we had talked previously on the phone. In my line of work, I'm a retired federal law enforcement officer. And in my line of work, we're not good at giving up control. And I know that I still fight. I still struggle. Every now and then when we have to get fingerprinted at work for our security clearance, the lady who would fingerprint us hated fingerprinting us, the officers. She goes, whenever she would fingerprint a felon, she said, they're a piece of cake. They're used to it. But she goes, you guys, you don't give up control. When I tell you to relax so I can roll your finger, none of you do. It's all fighting the whole time. And I think it's an occupational hazard that I'm still fighting. But I believe more than I used to.
So. What was it that you started to get?
Well,
Especially
it's
from an anthropological or science spirit.
yeah, because my background is mainly science. I have a master's in counseling psychology, and I did a lot of work in experimental psychology while I was going to school. And I look at cause and effect, and there are many things that you don't need God to explain in the universe.
I don't want to miss a thing.
Sure.
How's this volumes in the?
It sounds good.
In the mixer. Yeah. Sorry. So.
Oh, no, that's okay.
So I agree that you have. There's a lot of things in the material world
That you don't need God.
Effect.
Yeah, you don't need God to explain, but there's a whole lot of things, especially as I got more aware of what was going on, that you can't explain without God. Now, one of my atheist brothers and I have this discussion about every other time we get together, which is not very often. I'd love to, we just live too far apart. And it's part of the problem, and he's a complete atheist because you don't need God to explain the things that are important to him. Yet, if you don't have God, then all the judgments of the world are subjective, and there's no objective standard of what behavior should be, like the Ten Commandments. Most of our laws for interpersonal behaviors are based on the Ten Commandments, whether people like it or not. That's where the majority of them come from. Well, if you don't need God and you don't have those Ten Commandments, then what you think is right and wrong is what's right and wrong. And that's wrong, in my opinion. Otherwise, people like sociopaths, they do whatever they want because it's right for them. Well, it's okay. I don't care that you suffer. I'm getting what I want. So that's just too bad. It just, my position more powerful than yours, so I win. And I'm sorry, that does not fit the world that I want to live in, and the world that I think we all function best in, even though God doesn't explain everything. And I probably won't understand until I die, and at which point I understand I won't have any more questions because I'll understand. I won't have to ask him anything because I'll understand.
Yeah.
So.
Right. So, because I see it too as we live in two worlds, okay? At the same time, we live in the material world and we live in the spiritual world,
Mm-hmm.
okay? Maybe it's equivalent to your conscious and your subconscious. And I do believe that actions speak directly to the subconscious. And maybe this is what we're talking about, maybe a standard, because moral law is a law.
Yep.
Now, I subscribe to that, okay, only because I'm the same with you, where I have not been saved my whole life. I've had a huge chunk of my life trying to find truth. And I found it in spiritual law and moral law, which helps govern me in this world, because I'm a mess.
You know, interesting choice of words, because in Raiders of the Lost Ark, where Indiana Jones is talking to his class, and he said, this is archaeology, and we deal in fact, not truth. If you want truth, take Professor whatever in philosophy, because truth is, fact is something that we can all agree upon externally. And truth for a whole lot of people is a very subjective decision. One of the other discussions I have, tying back to my brother, one of my atheist brothers, is he says he doesn't mind that I'm religious. It doesn't bother him that I'm religious because he believes that biologically we are predisposed to believe in something, because so many religions, so many cultures, every culture has some religion. But many of them are quite different, but that's because there's a congenital need, biological need, that either for him, through evolution, that's how it became. So he doesn't mind that, I believe. He has, of course, risen above that because he recognizes it's a biological need and I don't have to succumb to it. And to me, when I connect with the Spirit, with God's Spirit in the world, I just feel so different. And whether it's just because it's biology or it's God is really there, it doesn't matter to me because it's right. And I hope other people come to that same conclusion.
Right.
But that's their choice. So.
Well, so how does science mix with the gospel?
Interesting. There is a great little book. It's only about this thick, and it's called Fingerprints of God. And it's written by a Canadian astronomer whose name escapes me. Sorry if you're watching. Sorry I forgot your name. But if you're watching, hey, thanks. Good job, Danny. But it's Fingerprints of God, and he is an astronomer steeped in religion, or is steeped in hard science. But he goes, but look at the stars, the order, all those things. If you look at Genesis, there's 2 stories of creation in Genesis. And he goes, and they're not in opposition. They're actually perfectly in alignment. If you remember, one is from a position of an observer on earth. God created light and dark. And then the next day or whenever he created the sun and the moon. Well, how can you have light and dark if you don't have a sun yet? Well, in the early earth, our atmosphere was so dense with dust and other pollutants, basically, that you could not identify the sun, but you still had light. It's like when the shades are drawn on the window, you still see light, you just don't see the source of the light. And then the other description of creation is from off earth, and you see the creation of the universe and all that. So they're actually telling the same story, but from a different perspective. So I think science can fit in, and I would strongly recommend that book again, Fingerprints of God. Very thin book, but it's worth it.
So what is the gospel?
The gospel is the good news from God through Jesus to us, and having been raised Roman Catholic, there's only one gospel, but it's the gospel according to, and then it breaks into the 4. So it's what Jesus was doing on earth and the messages that he was giving us through 4 different sets of eyes. So again, for me, there's a gospel, 4 versions of it. And I am sadly not a biblical scholar, so I don't read the Bible very much. So.
Well, yeah, I'm digesting it and getting into it now. But a big part of the gospel is the crucifixion and the resurrection.
Mm-hmm.
For your scientific approach to those 2 things, the crucifixion and why he was crucified, and then what does it tell us about the resurrection? Does that, do you have a relationship with that?
I'm not trying to balance my words. I'm trying to find the words. This is one area where my brother, of course, would have issues because there's no scientific proof that it happened or that it can happen scientifically. But if you believe in an all-powerful God, nothing is beyond his power. So, and if it didn't happen, we're really wasting our time in the New Testament stuff, just to get the law from the Old Testament and the parts of Jesus where he's a great philosopher. Those are nice, but to actually believe, I do believe he... Now this is where I'm going to start crying, so I have to... This is why I don't read in church. When people ask me, why don't you ever do the readings? It's because I don't get through them without crying. So I do believe in the crucifixion and resurrection and his coming back at some point. But his current presence in our lives today. Sorry.
Tell me about a person who changed your music.
You know, one of my other mostly atheist brothers. We were raised Roman Catholic, so we went to school or to church together. He is a fantastic guitarist. He started playing guitar at least 15 years before I did, and helped me greatly. As I tried to learn guitar many times, never could until we started going to that one church in Glendale. To tell my wife's side of the story, they had a children's church. So since I was not a believer at the time, I would go help in children's church so I could escape from the real church. Well, they had this guy leading in music, who was a fantastic guitarist as well. So I decided, again, after having tried to learn guitar several times, I picked up my wife's old guitar, went to my brother, and he wrote down several sheets of just chords. And he said, take 10 minutes a day, sit down, do 4 strums of one chord, do it slowly enough that when you hit between the 4th and the next downstroke, you can go to another chord. So, and he goes, if you do more than 10 minutes, your fingers will start to hurt and you'll get bad habits. So I started doing that. And one day I was playing for 45 minutes without realizing it, and got involved in playing in children's church and then helped leading the kids in when it was time to come in, playing the guitar. So the 2 songs that I played for you earlier of the parodies, not parodies, but the songs that I had written, my brother is also a fantastic wordsmith. So I wrote the songs, but then I said, now, how can I improve them? So it ended up, he wrote about half the lyrics of the All of Me version that I did, and easily a third of the blues, St. Paul's Blues song. So even though he is not a believer, he certainly knows the fables, and with his word background, I mean, he's an English teacher and phenomenally gifted at that. So he was able to help me pick the right word. Well, he didn't help me pick. He gave me the right words that just tied the songs together. So he greatly influenced how I learned to play, and I only play rhythm guitar, as you saw, and the choice of terminology to get the right word for just the right meter and the right sense in the song, the right connotation. My brother Steve is fantastic at that.
Awesome.
So
what do you think of music theory?
I wish I understood it. Every now and then, if somebody says a 1-4-5 progression, I now know what that means. But when it comes time to, I've written many songs, 2 religious ones, but I've written many songs, but it's somebody else's melody that I just stole, and I always give them credit, of course, and I just write new words to it. Of course, Al Yankovic made an entire career out of doing that, so I guess it's okay. But yeah, the people who can do that, like what you were doing earlier, if I had eye teeth, I would give those.
Teeth?
Eye teeth, eye teeth. Yeah, not eyes, eye teeth. It's an old phrase. You're too young to know. That I would love to be able to do that. And my brother keeps trying to go, just do this. And by the time I go home, I have no idea of how that happened at all. So I only play rhythm guitar.
Yep.
I can count to 4 and I can count to 3, and that seems to work okay.
It's perfect, yeah.
So,
do you have any musical practices that you do?
I listen for songs that hook me in some fashion, and if they hook me, they're usually things that other people like, ultimately. I have not been a listener of Christian music until the last 3 or 4 years, and so most of the stuff I was playing for the Episcopal Church is out of the hymnal, and it's very staid, but that worked fine. And there was this one guy at our church in Glendale who, anytime the guitars would show up, he wouldn't go there. He would not be there when the guitars were there. And I asked him, I said one day, what kind of instruments did they have when Jesus was alive? Did they have the organs? Well, no. So they had guitars. All they called them lyres, but they had guitars and nothing else. And basically, he never talked to me again. So it's like I challenged his world.
Yeah, people are funny.
Yep.
Funny.
But then getting with the Presbyterian, we had a group that would go around and do hymn and prayer services at different nursing homes and stuff like that. And we would just do that for free to bring the gospel to people. And a lot of the old people, even though they can't see anymore or can't read anymore, you would play a song that they knew and they'd know every word of it. So I really saw the power of music in people's lives. But that was, again, most of the old songs because they were mostly old people, like 20 years older than me. So we had a group that went around, and one of the ladies in our choir was a Baptist, originally a Baptist, and she taught me harmonies, and she taught me all kinds of songs that we didn't know in the Episcopal Church. Well, I've started using those in the Presbyterian Church, and then they have taught me a whole bunch of the songs, and then listening to Christian music, songs like Almost Home or Lord, I Need You, Imagine, all those kinds of songs are so powerful. And the words that they use just evince so much. It's like one of the studies that we do in the Episcopal Church about the Bible is one of the ways they have is they give you a passage, and then you pick out one word from that passage and says what it said to you. And one thing it taught me is when I read the passage of the Bible, it says something different to me every time. It's not just rereading a novel. It really is a living book, and certain aspects of it speak to me based on what's going on in my life. Even the Christmas story, it's like, holy crap, I never saw that part of it before, but based on what's going on in your life. And when you do that in a small group and you hear how other people are picking up different aspects, and it's just amazing. I forgot what your original question was.
No,
Sorry.
no, it's perfect. I wanted to know what your musical practices were,
Nice. Okay.
but your musical disciplines and practices, but it kind of feeds in nicely because what was coming to my mind is what is your spiritual disciplines? What are your spiritual practices?
Sadly, not much. I do quick prayers. I think I'm still resisting praying, just sitting down, certainly kneeling and praying. I think I'm still resisting that. And yet I find myself more and more over the last 6 months doing more prayers in the car or during a commercial or during some quiet time. It's just, I was going to use the word intruding. It's intruding on my consciousness. So I think God cheats. And I think he's working his way around my defenses. And I don't know that that's fair, but I guess he is God. He can do whatever he wants. So.
Well, what's the most important thing you've learned in your life?
Credibility. It's and honesty. Part of that is from my line of work. Since we're testifying in court all the time, and we're swearing to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and we're doing that on a Bible. If you lie, you lose your credibility, and you can never get that back. At least in my mind, you can never get that back. So,
From who?
Let's say like if I lie in court and get caught, nothing I can say after that will ever be believed again in court. And again, that was my career for 30 years. So that as built in, it's like when I give my word to do something, I got to follow through. If I just have to do that. So to me, the most important thing is credibility.
So what was your life like before you learned that, and what is it like after you learned that?
Before I learned that, I was pretty much more of a hedonist. I kind of, since I didn't believe in God and I didn't believe necessarily in Ten Commandments and stuff, I was more of, I'm going to do what I want to do kind of person. And that's not very nice. And then having switched to that, I think it has made me a better person. I still certainly make mistakes, and I certainly at times disregard other people's feelings, or am at least not thinking of other people's feelings. But I think I'm much better at it than I used to be. So, and I think the church, if nothing else, even if there is no God, the church, if nothing else, is such a civilizing force to help us all live together much more peacefully. Again, an objective set of codes and morals versus a subjective set of codes. There aren't any churches, there aren't any hospitals I mean, there's a whole bunch of St. Anne's Hospital, St. Joseph's Hospital, and there's not a whole lot of atheist hospital, that kind of stuff. The people
I never thought of that.
yeah, it's people in the church are willing. Yes, there are bad people in the church without a doubt, and they can do horrible damage. But the vast majority of people know that they're sinners and know where they struggle and try to overcome that. And they try to help other people. And that's, whether there's a God or not, that alone is fantastic.
Right.
So we should believe just for that reason.
Yes.
So, but it helps that I think God does exist. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that church is for everybody, no matter where you're at. It's true, healthy people don't need a physician.
yeah, that's true.
But when you go to church, all of us have sin. He who has no sin casts the first stone, right? And to me, that brings me a lot of comfort, because I don't have to pretend, especially in that environment. I can go out in the community and be that person, the neighbor, and be playing music at the country clubs and at the bars and everything. But once a week, twice a week, we come in together to focus on one thing, which is truth, which is God.
Your comment made me think of two things. Hopefully I can remember them both. Is one that we're all sinners and we all make mistakes. When I hear a true professional play and they make a mistake, like I know I make plenty of mistakes when I play, but when I hear somebody fantastic make a mistake, I feel a whole lot better about my mistakes, because if they can make a mistake, certainly I can make a mistake. And then the other part of what you said is, a healthy person doesn't need a doctor. And yet frequently a person who thinks that they're healthy goes and, well, for example, I don't watch the news. I haven't watched the news for decades. But recently some newscaster some viewers wrote in and said, hey, there's something growing. Have you noticed it? And he had not noticed it.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, I don't know who.
I might.
Dan somebody on Fox News or something like that. And when it turned out to be something very serious, but here he was ostensibly and externally very healthy. But in fact, a friend of mine, well, when I had one of my first shoulder surgeries, this one physical therapist was not feeling well. My wife has more of a background in medicine than I do. And she was talking with him and she says, has anybody checked your blood sugar? Because the symptoms you're describing, well, it turns out he had diabetes and it was just rampant. And he's working with all these doctors. Outwardly, he looks like a super healthy guy, but it turns out he was relatively close to serious permanent damage or death. But because somebody noticed, even though you look healthy, it can be something. And so his health turned around phenomenally. Even though you might look healthy, it doesn't hurt to get a checkup.
It's true. No, absolutely. Introspection too, and being honest with that for the spiritual side. You see, that's how I see what you're saying, because there's the material side that we are, but I'm not this body.
Right. It's you have a brain, you are a mind. The physical structure allows the higher mental capacity and, where the soul is placed. It is a combined corporal existential body. So,
and that's how I see the gospel too. It's relevant in my life because I see it as a spiritual truth that they're revealing. And with insecurities and with fear, bad relationships and bad friends, that will destroy your spirit. And this is what we'd call spiritual death, but when you realize that, you only got one life to live and there's a light that can shine out of you, and there's no fear when this light is there. There's no insecurities. There's really nothing to stop you. To me, this is what how the gospel rings true to me. We're going to take a beating, emotionally in this life, physically as we age, but we will overcome it. We can overcome it spiritually, and receive what's happening to us as knowing that we're going through these trials to strengthen us.
Yeah. It's not what happens to you, it's how you deal with what happens to you. It's like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. When things happen to us, it's not that God is testing us, but when these trials come, how we respond really reflects what our true beliefs are, and how we can role model for other people. I don't try to behave because other people might be watching. I try to behave because that's the way I should be, even though certainly I fail. But it's, not what happened to you, but how did you deal with it? I think that ties in with what you were saying.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. Have you seen Jesus Christ work in somebody's life?
Absolutely. In my wife's life.
Tell me about that, will you?
Well, we were both raised Roman Catholic. We went to the same church, but we didn't know each other. We went to the same high school and didn't know each other. It was where we were going. There were 5,000 students at our high school. So even though we had friends in common, we did not know each other. Well, I rejected Roman Catholic Church based on what the priesthood was doing, not necessarily what their beliefs were. And Sandy's my wife, she always felt called to serve, but she was a girl. So the Catholics cut her out. So like when the churches were crowded, when a whole bunch of people showed up, they would all ask for the little boys to come up and sit inside the altar. Well, she always felt left out because, well, why should the boys get to go sit up there and I can't? So we both drifted away for a long time. When we got married and we started attending the Episcopal Church, one of the things that they do is during Holy Week on, I think it's I don't know this stuff real well. On Monday, Thursday, it's a prayer vigil with Christ, and you would either sign up for a half hour, and you'd either come into the church or you'd do it at home. And when your time came, you would lead into prayer, and then at the end. So, let's see if I can get through this. So she sat down to pray, and as she finished, she saw Jesus open his arms and thank her. So that was pretty powerful. Sorry. Again, God cheats.
How does God cheat?
Playing with my emotions. That's just not fair. Of course, I'm going to believe if you're going to start doing stuff like that. So yes, and then with that, she felt her calling come stronger and stronger until she ultimately decided to put in for the ministry, for the clergy. And our priest went to her and said, "I've been waiting for this." Your turn.
Christ started working in my life with the birth of my children. And so when I remember holding my little girl, and she's going to be 5 here in a couple months, okay? So it's not like it's been that long ago. I was 32 when I had her. So, and I remember holding her, and I thought to myself, I want what is good for her. And I want what is right for her. And even as she is growing and I see how innocent her thinking is, and the same thing happened with my boy. Now he's going to be 3 here this coming week, okay? And the same thing happened to him where I was overwhelmed with this experience. I was so overwhelmed. My sister got my son a book called The Giving Tree. It's real famous, and but I could not control
this emotion that was attached with this experience. And I remember just thinking, I want what is good and I want what is right from them. And then immediately I thought, well, who am I? Because I have been, for lack of a better word, I've been a degenerate my entire life. Okay? A moral degenerate. Trying to serve myself and using everybody around me to accomplish that. And in the way, I left a trail of sorrow. I couldn't balance it didn't make sense, the price of something versus the value of it, you see? And especially with friends and loved ones and protectors, you can't put a price on that, yet these are the ones that were suffering. You see, the closest people to me were suffering because of my stubbornness and and I knew what I was doing. I knew what I was doing wasn't necessarily right, you see, but I was like a scientist. I was like, well, I was challenging this authority, this iron invisible hand that was saying, no, this is right, okay? And this is how you should live your life. And it really boils down to the gospel. And what it boils down to is that I never took it on myself. I relied on everybody else to feed me and to give me their translations and what they think I should do, opposed to me sitting down and actually digging in. And so when my children came, I said, I want what is right for them. And it has to come through me, right? And it's not materialism, okay? That destroys. If you want to talk about spiritual death, give somebody a bunch of money, and then they don't have to think, they don't have to work, they don't have to earn anything,
Yep.
They don't respect anything that they get, and it's a big mess. It turns into a big mess. And to me, that's what money is, right? Money has a function and a purpose, and it's nice to have nice things, and that is true, but not at the cost of value, the value of my family, my loved ones, and my protectors, not at the price of my spiritual peace, and that's my relationship with God, the creator of the universe, Now you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but how has Christ worked in your life?
Well, when our son was born, and I knew that
The one in Alameda?
Yeah, the one in Alameda. Yep, he's, how old is he? He was born in 86, so he's 34 right now. So he's about where I was age-wise, and he and I had this conversation just a couple days ago, and his thinking, what he's saying right now, is exactly what I would have been saying at his age then. So I'm hopeful that he'll come around, because he and his wife are not attending church right now. And he was talking about, well, organized religion has these problems, and those were things I was saying. So I'm hoping that, as he changes, and they have a 1-year-old, she's a little over 1 year old. And when my son was born, I had to look at my behavior, because I had to role model good behavior. How can I expect him to be a good person if I'm not a good person, if I don't role model correctly?
Right.
So, at the most simple thing, when we're riding bicycles, when he was young, if he has to wear a helmet, I have to wear a helmet, or it's not fair. Because then they just wait to act grown up. When you're not around, they take the helmet off. So that changed a lot of my behavior by having him, which I think opened the door for God to start going, and what about this? And what about that? And what about that? So I'm hoping that Matt, down the road, goes through at least a similar progression to what I did. Whether or not he does, that's up to him and his conscience and his family and all that. But I also understand his thinking, where he is in his life right now.
I do too. Because it's true, I have the same feeling about the organized religion, Matt. I got the same feeling, okay? But it's a relationship. And that exists out of church.
Yes.
And it
Yes.
starts out of church. And it is a relationship between how you act and how you should act, and doing it because it's the right thing to do. Thought if my daughter was going to do the path that I chose, it would kill me. It would kill me, and my son, and so I relate exactly to what you're saying, I do think that there are grown-up things to do for sure, that children just aren't there, of course. But I tell my daughter all the time, what I'm trying to explain to her isn't what I think she should do. I'm trying to explain to her the rules that I have to follow too, because these are God's rules.
Yep.
We don't lie. That's in the Ten Commandments. Okay, we don't. We don't murder, and we don't do any of these things. That's not my rule. I'm not smart enough to make that rule. If it were up to me, I'd probably say, well, I don't know, it depends.
If it works for you.
If it works for you, it's subjective.
If you get the results you wanted.
Right.
Yep.
And that doesn't work, right?
Not in the long run.
And so Matt, it's the relationship that I have with Christ that is revealed in the scriptures, and it's the red letters, really. If you take anything from it, just open up a book that's got red letters, and those are the words of Christ, you see. And but my discipline isn't your rule. I wouldn't expect you to follow me, but be a scientist and like your dad.
Well, he's an intelligence specialist, so he's really good at analyzing things, at collecting the data and looking for patterns and seeing what is beyond what is at face value. And he's really good at that. And I think that ultimately he will. But again, it's his choice. So.
Well, how has God used adversity and challenges in your life to strengthen you?
Well, I'm not dead, so, and I've certainly had plenty of opportunities for that, both professionally at work and just having done stupid things. Again, it's one of the Nietzsche things that, one of the things I hate is when people say, well, Nietzsche, things that don't kill you make you stronger. And my response is, no, it just weakens you so the next pathogen will kill you. It's, yeah, you survived this one. It's, I've learned how to handle some of the stressors better. I've learned to pray for the people that are causing the problems. And I have frequently prayed, don't take whatever challenge I'm facing, don't take that away from me, but please make sure I learn whatever message you want me to learn so I don't have to go through this again. I'm going through this. I don't believe in a causal world, that God's doing this on purpose or whatever. The circumstances are the way the circumstances are, but please help me learn from it. I think there's a song out right now, I don't remember whose it is, whether what I'm facing is by providence, by chance, or by providence. Did you choose me to go through this? Does that make you mean? And if you did not choose it and it just happenstance, does that make you weak? Meaning God.
Do you have a favorite story in the Old Testament?
The best learning I have done in the Bible is when I was going with my son Matt to children's church, and we'd given him a children's Bible. And when he was in grown-up church, he couldn't play with toys and stuff. If you're not paying attention, you have to be reading in your Bible. And what I found was just the children's Bible was so much easier for me to understand that I really haven't gotten back into the real Bible so much as the children's Bible. The real Bible makes me think too much. I mean, golly. So, no, I guess I don't. Other than, in part of the sermon that we had today, from Vicky Lawrence, sorry, the lady who covered for, yeah, for Jonathan Evans today. It was part of Exodus, talking about Moses trying to do everything himself, and the elders coming to him and say, you can't do this all by yourself. Pick somebody from each tribe to help hold you up so that you don't have to do everything. Not anything. You don't have to do everything yourself. And that was a very powerful message.
Yeah, no, that's true, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I can't do it all myself.
Me neither. And yeah, having a good team, I think, is crucial. That's why we got Ross here, and we got Allison, and a lot of it is because things go wrong.
Yep. You can't think of everything. You can't have all the knowledge. For example, you guys were working with the technical stuff. That's magic. For me, you could add a magic wand over there doing stuff, and ooh, it works.
Ross is a magician. Yes. You know?
Nothing up my sleeve, presto.
You know, one of the stories of the Old Testament I really enjoy is I enjoy all of them, but I don't know all of them. Let me phrase it like that. But the ones that I do know, I like them. The story of Abraham is really cool because what it shows me is that God works in imperfect people. And to me, that gives a lot of comfort to me. You know, Abraham was called by God, but it doesn't mean that after he got called by God and started his journey, that he didn't make mistakes either, right? He tried to give his wife as a to the Abimelech, they call it, like the leader, but this was said it was his sister, and you could do whatever you want with her. And I mean, that what I'm saying is that these stories really teach us about the flaw of man, but how God operates through that, and everything kind of falls into his glory, into his timing.
Well, tying into that, David, again, I'm not a biblical reader, let alone biblical scholar, and Jonathan Evans at First Presbyterian was talking about David, and what a flawed individual that was. Holy moly, maneuvering to get this guy killed so he could sleep with his wife and all that. It's like, yeah, that's God's chosen. So I guess when I make my mistakes, I'm part of that team. And then if I may anticipate your next question about from a New Testament side, when I forget in which version of the gospel it is, they're talking about Jesus's lineage, and the people that are identified in that lineage, there are some really bad people in there, and that it was, I forget one, but one of the ladies that was named in the lineage, first it was atypical because it was a female being named in a Jewish, predominantly patriarchal society, and they're naming women, and some of the women,
Esther and Ruth.
yeah, and it was showing that good can come from anything, and especially Jesus as good came from this line. And I had never heard it that way. Again, the Catholics were not really good at, and no disrespect to the Roman Catholics. I'm going back on memories from 40 years ago, 50 years ago. So the current Catholic Church is different. So please don't take offense. But if you do, you do. But the good news is you have to forgive me, because that's part of our culture. The Catholics back then, we were told not to read the Bible. We'll tell you what you need to know. It was we're on top. You guys are peons, basically. Again, 50 years ago. And now I'm hearing these stories from, again, now the Episcopal Church and the Presbyterian Church. I'm going, I never knew that. And what a fantastic perspective. When Jonathan was saying, again, in whichever gospel it was, talking about Jesus's, the description of his lineage was amazing, of how flawed those people were. the people in that lineage.
Yeah.
Which gives me permission to accept myself as being substantially flawed as well.
Yes, and to kind of add to that a little bit, what I see is that even though they're flawed and we are flawed, at any time we could use spiritual elements like courage and faith and vision, to progress our life. When the Spirit tells us to do something, I mean, that is the authority. That is the absolute top authority. And when you're operating out of, love your God with your heart, mind, and your soul, and love your brother or love your neighbor as you would love yourself, you add these two things together. I see it as alchemy almost.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's true. We are flawed, and somebody like me is just a mess, but I can use faith, and I can use a vision of, let's say, starting a music ministry and a nonprofit, and I can absorb myself in this work, and it really keeps me out of trouble, and I'm serving a higher power. It's not for me. I understand that the corporation owns everything. I don't want to own anything, okay? And this is kind of taking the line of Christ, because Christ says that you have a better shot a camel has a better shot of going through the eye of a needle than a rich man into heaven. And the truth is, if the corporation collects everything and I don't, and I'm not, I do operate it because it's not going to operate itself, but we can use knowledge and wisdom, which is spiritual. I see it as spiritual. Again, my discipline is not anybody's rule. How I see music isn't anybody's rule.
Right.
Okay? I see music as a form of God's creation. And I understand a side of God's creation through my understanding of music theory and all that, but I don't expect anybody to subscribe to how I see it. Mm-hmm. We're all at different places, and the same is true with the spiritual plane too. And so I like the Old Testament and the New Testament, because even Paul says that, why is it that I do the things that I don't want to do? And I do the things that I don't want to do.
Yep, and I don't do the things I know I should do.
Right.
If I may, two things on what you had just said. One of the things that Sandy taught me is, again, talk about using people who are flawed. When people get called to do something, and many of us will say, yes, but, and I don't want to, Sandy taught me that God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. If you're called to do something, he'll help you do it. The Holy Spirit will help you do it. Yes, you may not even know the words, but they will be provided. And then the other thing is talking about love your neighbor as yourself. Love God with all your heart, soul, and mind. Reminded me, it's a phrase from a song. We were talking about Harry Chapin earlier.
Yep.
Harry Chapin wrote the music to a fantastic one-man play called The Cotton Patch Gospel. And there's several versions of it out, but the one I would encourage you to buy, if nothing else, and it's Cotton Patch Gospel. The actor is Tom Key, Key, and he's got a 4-piece band that does music. Well, Harry Chapin wrote all the music for this. It is incredible, and it's the story of Jesus from life, from birth, from pre-birth to after resurrection, in modern day Georgia, and it is incredible. Again, Cotton Patch Gospel. We used to buy a whole bunch of copies and pass them out, but it's really hard to find them anymore. I've loaned mine to Jonathan. Jonathan, I want it back. Watch it and give it back to me.
Needs it back.
So I can loan it to somebody else. But I cannot encourage anybody to watch that enough. I watch it at least once every 6 months.
Wow.
And I used to watch it every week. It's just the music is fantastic. The acting is incredible. And it's a one-man show with almost no props or anything. It's one guy on a stage doing all the parts, and then this musical group that gets mixed in just to do the music. It's incredible.
Awesome.
And it ties in with a whole bunch of things we've been talking about. So really, really powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I got one more question, and then we're going to listen to your music at the end of this conversation. Now, if you could tell your younger self some words of wisdom that you wish you knew then that you know now, what would you tell your younger self? What advice would you give?
Wow, that's really, because I'm putting myself in the mindset of what I was like back then, that the way that you view the world, the way that I was viewing the world at the time, is self-centered. And if you would understand what Christ was trying to tell me at that time, my relationships with other people would have flowered. That I would understand and care about their position. That one thing to understand their position and not care, but to understand and care about, and your life will be immeasurably better, and their life will be immeasurably better. Enunciation is not my forte. Immeasurably better. So.
And beautiful. Fred, thank you so much.
It has been my pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah.
The songs, if we can talk about the songs for just a second.
Oh, absolutely. Please.
The blues type song is St. Paul's Blues, and that's a song that I wrote to the tune of Kansas City Blues, or Kansas City. And then, let's see, I'm going to do, because it's through the magic of editing, it's going to come after this, something called You'll Come Shining Through. And a great song for children, but it's got a great message for adults too. And I don't remember what other song I'm about to do.
I don't know, but real fast before we turn it off, could you get me the white thing there? Now, kind of a tradition, what we do is we get our guests a little, we get a little package here. And so there's a thank you, because you said that you like certain foods and everything. And anyways, this is a big thank you for you being on this little quest of mine, the spiritual journey of mine. And I know that you like some Reese's peanut butter stuff.
I love peanut butter anything.
And you like nice ribeye steak.
I do like nice ribeyes.
So I got you a little bit of each.
Yeah, you are too kind. You are truly too kind.
You are too kind, because my little project here has been humbling, and God bless you for helping me.
Actually, no, God bless you for doing it. What a fantastic idea. And I bet it is way more work than you thought it was going to be.
Oh, yeah.
People do not understand, including me, do not understand everything that goes on doing this. And what you were doing is a really good service and very eye-opening. So thank you for listening to the Spirit and not saying no, because it's really easy to say no.
Yep.
So thank you again.
Thank you. Hey, we'll see you guys next time.